Examining poetry. Today our learning target is I can analyze the elements of a poem to help gain a deeper understanding of what the poet is trying to convey. So we're going to be using the poem Brave New Heights that you already glued inside your reading journal. So before we get started, make sure you have your reading journal with you, open up to this poem. If you need to go get this poem, please pause this video so you can go get it. So the first thing you want to do whenever you get any new poem, of course, is just to read through it. Read through it a couple of times, read through it slowly. So go ahead and read it along with me this time. It's titled Brave New Heights by Monica Quilling. I hear Amelia Earhart took a plane and flew it like a bullet, straight up through the clouds into an atmosphere we can't see. And when the engine cut, the plane being pushed as high as it would go, I hear Amelia Earhart turn that plane straight back, down into a blanket of foggy cloud lying thick and nearly to the ground. Only with the clouds gone could she pull back on the stick, the ground screaming in her face. Amelia tacked that plane back into the sky, saving herself and breaking another flying record. So notice how whenever I'm reading it, I want to take my time reading it, pause at the end of each line and stanza to make sure I really understand what's happening in this poem. Now let's take a look at some of the elements of poetry. So the first type of structure that you will look at for any poem is lines and stanzas. So the first thing I'm going to want you to do is always number your lines and stanzas. So most poems, they're written in lines, and a group of lines is called a stanza. So basically think of in a normal story, you would see paragraphs. Well, instead in a poem, you call it a stanza. So I'm going to go ahead and number my lines here in this poem. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I've numbered the lines. Now I'm going to number the stanzas, S1 and S2. Now the reason you want to always number your lines and stanzas is because it's going to really be helpful when you're trying to answer questions and give proof of your work. It's just going to make it a whole lot easier. So now let's go in and number the lines and stanzas of your poem. Now this is really tiny for me on the iPad, so my numbers may not be as good as yours, but you'll get the idea. So as you can see, I've numbered my lines and stanzas. Go ahead and pause this video so that way you can go ahead and number yours. I have 4 stanzas and 23 lines. So make sure that you do that before we move on, okay? So besides looking at the structure of a poem by numbering the lines and stanzas, one of the most popular things to look at in poetry is rhyme. Now, most people think that every poem has to rhyme, which is not true at all. Not every poem has to rhyme, but very often it is something that you will find. So whenever you read a poem, go ahead and take a look to see if you can find any rhyming words on your own. It'll help you out a lot whenever you're trying to figure out the structure and how the author organized the poem. So rhyming words could be words that that have the same ending and have the same sound. So like hat, cat, bat, or cloud and aloud. It doesn't have to necessarily be spelled the same way, but sounds similar. So now let's take a look at our poem. So for this poem, I see in stanza 1, I'm looking at the last word of each line. So I see Earhart, plane, no, those do not sound the same, bullet, clouds, atmosphere, sea. So I don't see anything that rhymes in stanza 1. Engine, cut, pushed, go, nothing there. Earhart, plain, back, blanket, thick, ground, so nothing seems to rhyme there. Gone, stick, face, plain, sky, breaking, record. So as you can see in this poem, there's nothing that rhymes in there. But you would do the same thing in order to find rhyming words in any of the poems. You would just go through it and try to figure out what parts of it rhyme. So we're going to look at two types of figurative language in this poem. The first one we're going to look at is a simile. It's probably the easiest one to spot and identify, and probably the easiest for writers to write their own are similes, which is basically a comparison of two things using the words like or as, and it's comparing one thing to another to create a really cool image for the reader's mind. So the example I have here is the runner streaked like a cheetah. So as you can see, I have the keyword like, okay? And it's comparing the runner to the cheetah. And I'll draw the arrow down here. It's the runner to the cheetah. And it's basically trying to say the runner runs extremely fast, as if it's a cheetah, since a cheetah runs really fast. So this is just a way to create better visuals and connections for the reader, and it sounds just a lot cooler whenever you're using similes instead of saying the runner ran really fast. Well, you could say the runner streaked like a cheetah. Now look carefully through this poem and see if you can find the simile. When you find it in your poem, go ahead and circle the line on the page and label simile next to it, okay? So go ahead and pause this video, find a simile, and circle it. Remember, a simile is going to use two words. It's either going to use like or it's going to use as, okay? So those are the two keywords to look at. Think about what two things is it comparing? Kind of like how the runner was being compared to a cheetah. What two things is it comparing? I'm not going to tell you the answer for this because this is actually part of your work to submit today. And then the next type of figurative language we're going to look at besides a simile is personification. Personification is probably one of my favorites. I love using it in my writing. I love finding personification in writing. So personification basically gives human traits and feelings to things that are not actually human. And I like to remember it because I see the word person in the word personification. And so that really helps me think of the definition of it. So the example here is the moon smiled down at me. So it's using the moon, which is not a human, and the moon cannot actually smile. So it's giving a human trait or a feeling to something that is not human. So the moon smiled down at me. So you're basically looking for something that cannot actually do that in real life, okay? So like if the wind whistled, well, the wind can't actually whistle, but it's a great way to tell the reader or a visual, or give them a visual or description. So see if you can find one now in your poem. So here's our poem again. Now see if you can find an example of personification. When you do, go ahead and circle it and label it personification. Remember, think of something that they can't actually do that human characteristic. So try to find something that is not human, not real, and that's doing something that humans do. Okay, so when you find it, you can go ahead and label it personification. 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 Okay, so go ahead and pause this video so that way you can find it. Now, this was the last piece that we're going to be looking at for this poem. Now, after you're done with this, you're going to go into Google Classroom, click on the assignment, and there's 4 questions. One question is to write what is the simile from the poem. The other is what 2 things is the simile comparing. Write the personification from the poem. And then the last question is just tell me a little bit what is the poem about. Okay? Hope you guys enjoyed the video.